Welcome to Save on Plants. In this info video, we'll be discussing the proper way of planting balled and burlap plants. While this specific info video is entitled for balled and burlap plants, which is the top right corner photograph, the instructions are almost identical to plastic potted plants. The big difference is that the balled and burlap plant is never ever disturbed in terms of its root ball. At root ball, you must handle it like an egg. You do not try to scratch up the roots. You do not try to crack the root ball. You leave it 100% intact. The material is not to be removed, and the cord is to be left on until after it's planted, at which time all you do is you cut the cord at the base of the trunk and leave it there. You do not even have to remove the cord at any time. Just cut it, loosen it up around the base of the trunk, and peel back the material a bit. Another small difference with the balled and burlapped, we recommend a smaller window for when you can plant them, and this would be late April to early May. Throughout this video you will hear us use balled and burlapped or plastic pot possibly interchangeably in the videos. We did this to save time because, as we mentioned, the instructions are basically identical for the two in terms of the planting. The big difference is how you handle the root ball. With the plastic potted plants, you do remove the plastic pot. That does not go into the ground, and you do scratch up the roots. You also have a wider window as to when you can plant a plastic potted plant versus balled and burlapped. When planting any type of balled and burlap plant, we always encourage you to plant these before May 7th. The reason for this is that the roots have not started to stretch out yet, and the balled and burlap material is not treated. Because it's not being treated, it will actually decompose probably by about mid-May, in which case the root ball will start to fall apart and start to have some problems with it. If you were to choose balled and burlap material that was treated with either copper sulfate or arsenic, you run into trouble with that material does not decay and it actually contains the roots when they're trying to stretch out during the early part of the season. For that reason, we only sell plants in non-treated balled and burlapped, and we encourage you very strongly to do all these plantings before May 7th. We will extend the selling period to May 15th if it is a cool spring and the ball and burlap material is still holding together well, which does occur in some springs depending on the weather. Now, cedars in general are best planted in late April or early May if they're balled and burlapped, or in early September if they are properly pot grown. And by properly pot grown, what we recommend is that they be balled and burlapped in the springtime, dug in March like they should be, balled and burlapped, and then potted up right away into plastic pots, into a larger plastic pot with a soil medium to transition the roots from the balled and burlapped to where they're going to be ultimately on your property. In addition to that, there's bone meal that is used around that root system to help stimulate the roots so that when you go to plant that in September, you've got yourself a very healthy root ball. You want to avoid planting balled and burlap plants in September because either A, they were dug in the summertime, which is not a good time to be digging these trees up, or B, they were treated with either arsenic or copper sulfate to extend the life of that balled and burlap material. And again, as we mentioned, by doing so, you are going to restrict the growth of those roots, and we will not sell any plants in treated balled and burlap material. Now, a drainage test hole is very important. The more test holes you do, the better. And what a test hole is all about is trying to find out what kind of drainage you have on your property. And this can vary greatly, not just from location in terms of town or city to city, but actually literally within someone's own backyard. You can have a range of drainage depending on how that soil was handled when they built your home. You can end up having a pocket of sand in one corner and some clay in another corner. So it's really important to know the exact drainage in the exact locations where you're going to be planting. So we encourage you to do a test hole at the location where you're going to be planting. Now, this is not a waste of time as far as the work goes, because that test hole will ultimately be the hole for your plant. So you got to dig the hole anyway. Dig the hole, fill it up with water, monitor how quickly it drains. We have run into situations where two holes that were dug literally 5 feet apart from each other had totally different soil, where one would drain almost immediately and the other one would still hold the water 5 days later. So you want to know what kind of drainage you have. You can work with all these different types of drainage. That's not the problem. The problem is not knowing what you have with respect to drainage. So take the time, wherever there's going to be a plant, dig a hole, fill it up with water, make a note how quickly it drains. Bring that information with you, and we will help you to design a custom watering schedule specifically for that type of plant and that type of soil to eliminate the guesswork. Because as we've talked about in our other info videos, the biggest reasons plants fail, especially cedars, is because they don't have a good root ball. That's our responsibility as a grower and the garden centers to make sure you get a proper root ball, and you'll get that from us. Now we have to make sure that they get watered properly. You put those two together and you should have 100% success, and that's what we want to see. Now, planting balled and burlap plants, there's no exceptions to this whatsoever. You leave the burlap material on the root ball. Do not cut the material. Do not do anything with that material. As you receive it from us, that is going to go into the ground as one package complete. Do never purchase plants in treated burlap or twine. You'll know it's treated burlap or twine if it's either a bluish or a greenish color. Untreated burlap and twine will be a natural tan color, sort of like sand. Treated burlap is good for the garden centers but bad for the customer. It extends the shelf life of the material, but is usually either copper sulfate or even arsenic, which is toxic. It slows down the material from breaking down and thereby prevents the roots from spreading out. You don't want that. You want those roots to start to establish themselves and get settled in, and they're not going to do that if they're being held back by the treated burlap material. Now, you only cut the twine around the burlap after it's planted. That is, it's in the ground and the root ball itself is covered with soil. The twine that wraps the burlap tight against the trunk of the tree at the base of the trunk, that is where you cut it, and you can peel that back a bit away from the trunk. But you don't do this until it's in the ground and covered with soil and you know you're not going to be moving it around anymore. You do not remove the burlap at any time. Make sure you watch this complete video before you actually start your planting. Handle the root balls with care. Do not drop or try to break them up in any way. We've seen this where customers think that they are benefiting the root by trying to break that root ball. You've guaranteed death to the root ball. Plants that are grown in plastic pots, yes, those you would scratch up the roots. But if it's balled and burlap, you do not disturb the root system. In fact, you should be treating that root ball just like it's an egg. And we've come up with some new systems to reduce the vibration on the plants as they're being moved around from the farms to us, as well as from us to you. And this has dramatically improved any possible chance of damage to the root ball. Once it's in your responsibility, in your possession, you've got to do your part to make sure that you don't drop these root balls or be careless with them and drag them around. You lift them and treat them just like they're an egg, and you won't have any problems with them. You also have to protect the root ball from dehydrating. Because they're balled in burlap, as they are, they will dehydrate quickly. So being moist alone is not enough. Again, we've come up with some techniques to ensure that they're kept hydrated while they're here, and we have some systems that will help you, or advice that will help you once they get onto your property, how to maintain them until they're ready to be planted. And it's very important that you follow these instructions. The best thing to do is actually pick them up just before you're ready to plant them. However, if that's not the case, not convenient for you, you can pick them up ahead of time, but do follow our instructions on hydrating these root balls properly until they're ready to be planted. In addition to, you may have to do some frost protection if you're planting before the end of May, which is when you should be planting. It's a double-edged sword there. You want to plant early, but you also have to do a little extra protection from the possible frost. Cedars are generally pretty good against frost. However, we've had some wild swings in our weather over the last couple years, and we have seen some damage done to cedars because of severe frost after warm periods. Now the actual hole that you're going to prepare for your tree should be about twice the volume of the actual root ball that you're going to be placing in there. Again, this info video is on plastic pot or plastic rooted root systems that are in plastic pots, but it's the same guidelines for balled and burlapped. And if you take a look to the right of the hole where the tree is going to be sitting, we have another hole, and we call this the Big O inspection pipe. And what this is for you to see how much water or moisture is at the bottom of the root ball at the same depth as the bottom of the root ball. So if you look, there's a dashed red line that goes across from the hole for the plant, and it's at the same level as the bottom of the Big O pipe, which is located a foot or two away from the root ball itself. And the idea is you do not see the bottom of the root ball normally, so you can't tell if it's sitting in water or if it's dry or what the conditions are down there. This Big O inspection pipe located near the root ball, and is going to be exposed also to the same conditions of that root ball, will give you a very good idea what the moisture content is at the bottom of your root ball for your plant. Now there's no dirt put into the hole of the Big O. You want it totally empty and clear, because that red arrow pointing down to the bottom, that's going to be your hand. You will put your hand down the bottom of the Big O pipe, touch the soil or the water to see what's going on down there, and then you'll have the information you need to determine whether or not it's time to water again, because you never water your plants again until the water is completely drained. And in some cases you're going to wait 24 hours or possibly even longer before you water again. But you never water if there is water sitting at the bottom of that root ball. If the bottom of the root ball is sitting in water, that's more than enough. You now need to allow that water to drain completely. If you have very heavy clayish type soil, this may take a while. And we'll give you information specifically with that later on in our info video, because if you got heavy soil that drains very slowly, you are going to be putting a lot less water into your hole than you would if you have normal drainage or sandy soil. Another point here is if you look at the sides of the holes around that root ball, it's kind of a squiggly line. What we're trying to present there is that the sides are rough. You do not want a smooth surface around where your root ball is going to be, because those roots, as they grow out, will hit the smooth surface, bounce back in towards the center of the plant, and end up choking themselves out again. So a rough surface, even though it doesn't look as nice, is actually much better for the plant long term than a smooth surface. This can become a problem when people use augers to make their holes, because the auger makes a beautiful smooth surface. If you've got heavy clayish type soil, what will happen is the roots will bounce off that smooth surface and come back towards the center of the plant, and down the road will choke the tree out. So keep this in mind, especially with heavy soils. Do not try to make a beautiful smooth surface. Make it rough. The roots will get into the crevices of that rough surface, and that will force them to continue in that direction rather than bouncing off a smooth side. Another point here I want to mention, if you look at the top of that root ball, it is higher than the surrounding soil. This is generally our advice for most soil conditions. If by chance you've got sandy beach soil, which occurs probably 1 or 2% of the time, very rare, you could go flush with the top of your root ball. But otherwise, always plant an inch or so above the surrounding soil. Now this shows an alternative location for the inspection pipe. In the previous slide, we showed that the inspection pipe was located outside of the hole where the root ball was. Here we have it inside of the hole, and this might be the only option for you if you've got a very tight area. So this is fine, but don't have it right up against the root ball. Keep at least 8 inches away from the Big O, or keep the Big O pipe at least 8 inches away from your root ball. As mentioned earlier, whenever you're planting, you should always fill your holes with water first. This does two things. It helps to saturate the surrounding soil, plus it gives you information as to how quickly the water will drain in your particular type of soil. And a lot of times what you'll have to do is you may have your plants home, you're ready to plant, however you haven't tested your soil yet and you haven't put water into your holes yet. it's probably easier to water one day your holes or fill them up, and then make plants actually plant the following morning, early in the morning. And most of the work is the actual holes being dug. So if you've got that all done, you can put a lot of plants in the ground in less than an hour, as long as your holes are already dug and the ground's been watered already at least once. You'll notice too that we flood the area with water, and you don't just flood the hole for the tree, you have to flood your test hole, because you want to duplicate the conditions in your test hole that are going to be around your plant. Otherwise you're going to get a false reading. Now, natural rain obviously duplicates the conditions for both the test hole and the plant hole identically the same. But when you're watering manually, you would have to directly fill your hole, your test hole, with water, as well as the hole around the tree. Now, when you're watering the tree, you're probably going to use about 20 times as much water as required to fill your test hole. So keep that in mind. Just because your test hole filled with water in 5 or 10 seconds, your tree itself is going to take probably 20 times that in terms of volume and time, simply because it's a bigger hole. Now, this particular video, when you put this much water in your system, this is when you have average soil or sandy soil. If you have slow draining soil, you would not be using this method. You would be using half the amount of water, and we will identify for you later on whether or not you have slow draining soil or medium to fast draining soil. The idea of the inspection pipe, and we can't stress this enough, is to allow a window into the water level down at the depth of the root ball bottom. If there is water at the bottom of the inspection pipe, then there is water at the bottom of the root ball, and you do not need to water. Again, you have to mimic the conditions at the big O inspection hole right the same as you would at the plant itself. They have to be exposed the same way. So you need, say, 1 gallon of water to fill your inspection hole. You now have to multiply by 10 or 20 times as much to fill the area around the root ball of the plant. During the first year, you should water heavy again shortly after the water has drained away at the bottom of the inspection pipe. In most cases, within 24 hours after is about the right time, but the water has to be gone completely, 100% gone. You can't have water sitting in there. If you have water sitting in there, you are not to water again. During the next year, you can extend the timing between the watering. The amount of water will actually increase as the plant becomes larger. It will need more water. However, you'll be increasing the time between the waterings by even more. So during the first year, you might find yourself watering every 2 or 3 days heavy. During the second year, you might water every 3 or 4 days heavy, but you'll be using 10 or 15% more water during that second year per application than during the first year, because you have a larger tree now. Now, preparing your hole for the planting, you want to mix some bone meal at the bottom of the root system. So this is the brown bar that you see in our diagram here. You would have at least 1 or 2 cups of bone meal, depending on the size of your plant, mixed in with the soil mixture, and your root ball is going to be sitting directly on top of that. That area there should be flat and loose. You want that root ball to settle into that soil. Now, if it's a plastic pot, it's going to have a flat bottom, so you'd want to have a flat bottom in your hole, and it'll sit directly on top of that. Don't forget, you do have to loosen your roots up before you actually do the planting. Now, I want to again stress again, nothing goes into your big O pipe. The big O pipe is left empty because where that blue arrow is right now, that is going to be your hand going down to the bottom of that root ball or that big O pipe to see if there's moisture down there. When the hole is half filled with the soil mixture and the bone meal that you've put in so far, begin adding more water. You want that soil to start settling down. You don't want any air pockets in there. Continue adding bone meal and the soil mixture until you get to the top of that root ball. And you can always add about 1 inch of soil mixture on top of the root ball, but not against the trunk of the tree. Always keep dirt and mulch away from the trunk of the tree, and you flood it the first time. You want a lot of water no matter what the conditions are, because you've got to get that soil to settle down. You're not even necessarily watering the root ball. What you're doing is watering the soil. You want that soil to settle down. You can't have air pockets around your root ball. Again, note the top of that root ball is sitting slightly higher than the ground around it, and you can mound soil on top of that, but not against the trunk of the tree. Here is a more finished diagram showing the brown line at the top would be your finished grade. Now you add dirt back into the hole a little bit at a time, alternating between the bone meal, and you're probably going to use about a cup of bone meal to every 3 to 4 gallon size pot. Every pot we have has a standard industry standard size, whether it's 1 gallon or 20 gallon size pot, and you need about a cup of bone meal per 3 to 4 gallon of pot size. When the hole is filled, you want to water heavy again. Press down on the soil with your hands only to help eliminate the air pockets around there. Do not step on the root ball. You should only be using your hands to compress that soil, break up the soil. You can damage root balls by stepping directly on the root ball. In this case, again, this is plastic potted, but damage can easily happen to balled and burlapped. So you never step on any type of plant, no matter what, on the root ball. Always use your hands and always off to the side of the root ball. There's no need to be pressing on the root ball itself. And we always stress that you use 50% triple mix with 50% native soil. You don't want to use 100% triple mix with any of your plants. It can be a little bit too rich. Boxwoods seem to tend to take pure triple mix very well, but as a general rule, 50% triple mix, 50% native soil, plus your bone meal, and you won't have. Now, during the second year, this is not the year you're planting it, the year afterwards, we will give you, depending on how much you've purchased, a supply of commercial grade fertilizer for free, no cost. This is the best stuff you can buy. It's what the professionals use, and it's got a special osmocote coating on it. It's released based on the temperature, precipitation, etc. It's a very good fertilizer, but you can't use it the first year. You don't use any fertilizers the first year. You use only bone meal, which is a root stimulant, or Calfloss, which is also a root stimulant. You do not use any type of fertilizer from anybody during the first year, because that pushes the plant and it's not established yet. You want those roots to be really well established before you're asking the plant to start growing quickly. So just let natural growth be what you're going to get the first year. Second year you come back, we give you free fertilizer in most cases, and that you would apply that ideally at the end of April, early May. April and May, there's some planting precautions that we are recommending now. The weather has been fluctuating more wildly than what we've been accustomed to in the past. We've had some really warm Aprils and some really cold Aprils. So as an extra precaution, what we're recommending that people do until the end of May is be on alert for possible frost damage, which is always a possibility. We do like to plant in later April. That's a great time to plant before the roots start to push out, especially on the cedars. But if you're doing that, be on alert for possible frost stress. Now, frost stress is the worst you can get. It's worse than having ice on your plants. Ice actually will not bother your plants. It will actually protect your plants. But frost, because of the shape of the molecules in the frost itself, what you end up getting is these jagged little edges that literally will damage the surface of your plants. So you want to protect your plants from frost, and you can get frost almost till the end of May. So we definitely don't encourage you to plant any perennials until the latter part of May. But with a lot of the evergreens, trees, it is good to plant them in late April or early May, but be a little bit on the alert for frost. The best way to protect against that is to either throw a bed sheet over top of the plant if it's going to be below 7 degrees Celsius that night, and it has to be a calm night. A couple things have to be present for frost. One is below 7 degrees Celsius, also very little wind. In other words, a calm night, and then no clouds. If you got all three of those things, you're going to have frost that night, guaranteed. And severity of frost can vary quite a bit depending on those conditions. But if it's raining, you're not going to have frost. If there's a lot of cloud cover, you won't have frost. If it's windy, there's no frost. If it's above 7 degrees, there's no frost. So, but you're going to get several days between the end of April to the end of May where there is definitely a good chance of frost, and you want to protect against that no matter what. Again, quick way to doing it for a smaller area would be just throw a bed sheet, a blanket, whatever you want over top of the plants in the evening, and they can actually stay on all day. It's not a problem for the plant. It might get blown off. You got to put it back on. If it's a little bit of windy in the evening, but the conditions look like you might get frost because things will calm down later, and your bed sheet's getting blown off, what you can do is spray water on top of the bed sheet. That will give it some weight so it doesn't blow off. And if it's cold enough, it'll actually freeze up a little bit, which is even better because less likely that it's going to blow off with that stiffness in it. So you can do that to protect your plant against cedars or against frost. Another quick way to do it too is you can spray water on your plant late in the evening just before you go to bed, and that will add another level of protection on your evergreens especially. You won't have to worry about this in most cases with deciduous plants, just your evergreens, and in particular with the cedars. You might get a little bit of frost damage on them. So you can't spray them. You spray them with water just before you go to bed. You don't even have to put anything on top of that. That water alone will do quite a bit to protect them. But if you did a combination of spraying water and then a bed sheet on top and spray water again, you're not going to have any problems at all. You don't want to use solid plastics on your evergreens for a couple reasons. One is they'll blow off real easy. All it takes one little gust of wind and it'll be blown off in no time. So something solid like a sheet of plastic generally does not work very well to stay on all night. In addition, if you forget and leave the plastic on the next day, you can create problems with it overheating underneath it. So a bed sheet is not a problem. You can forget about it. You can leave it on there the next day. It's not going to harm your plant. You don't want to leave it on permanently, but for a couple of days you can leave a bed sheet on an evergreen. It's not going to bother the plant at all. Here's a side sketch of, say, a backyard with a slope to it. The green down line is your backyard. At the very bottom you'll see there's a blue line, and this is where the water is going to end up accumulating. Again, if you were to plant upslope on that line, that green line, and you dig a hole down, the water would now accumulate inside that hole. Even though it's not the lowest point in the backyard, relatively it is the lowest point because you've got the soft soil that allows the water to drain down to the bottom of that soil until it hits the hard soil at the bottom of your hole. One way to get around that, if you're planting up a slope, is if you want to imagine this, you're up in the air looking down on your backyard. The hole is the blue hole there with the word hole in the center is what you've prepared for your new plant, and just above that is a half moon. And the idea of that half moon is to prepare a dam or a diversion for the water that's running down the slope of your backyard, which is the blue arrows. Those blue arrows, when they get to that dam, will now bounce off it to the side, run past the hole. So rather than running down into the hole, they're running past the hole, and this way the hole doesn't overfill with water, keeping the root system too wet for too long. Make note if you have any downspouts that are coming towards the new plants that you're putting in, because if you do have a downspout, you have to keep in mind that the water from that roof area is all going to come down into a very small concentrated area, and that area is going to be a lot wetter than what you would expect, especially compared to the rest of the yard, which will be much drier. So despite people believing that cedars want to be wet all the time, they really don't want to be wet all the time. They want to be lightly moist all the time, but not sitting in water. It's just like a human being. If they sat or were below water for too long a period of time, they would suffocate, and so would the roots of cedars or any other plants. There are very few plants that can actually sit in water for any period of time. Some hydrangea varieties can tolerate water for long periods of time, but generally speaking, most plants cannot. So if you see areas like this in your backyard, that is an area where water is accumulating for one reason or another. It might be a low point, there might be a downspout from your house, your neighbor's house, runoff from a driveway, a patio, etc. But that's a red flag right there. Here's a beautiful patio, probably about 100 feet across from the grass up towards the house. And keep in mind that there's probably a downward slope on that patio towards the grass. And what's going to happen when it rains, if you get a half an inch of rain, which is that's a pretty good rain, all that water that's falling down the patio is going to accumulate as it runs down the slope and then just drop off the edge. So at the very edge of this patio, you're not going to get half an inch of rain. You're going to get 2 feet of rain, literally, coming down in that one small area. So that area is going to get very wet. And if there isn't good drainage, if it's not real sandy soil, and most people don't have real sandy soil, that water is going to sit there for quite a while. And if you've got really heavy clay, it could end up being wet permanently. So again, test holes are very important to keep an eye on what's going on with drainage. But this is a red flag easily seen on a basic site inspection. And keep this in mind when you're looking around your backyard, patios, driveways, etc. They are all going to have runoff, and they multiply the amount of water that is present along the edge there where you may be placing plants. Now, salting is very common on sidewalks and driveways, etc. Obviously, the benefit is that it eliminates the ice, makes it a safer walking surface. However, plants do not like salt. There is no plant that likes salt. Some plants will tolerate it better than others. We encourage you to use absolutely no salt around any of the plants, regardless. However, if there's a situation where there may be a minimal amount of salt that you just can't prevent because of a road or a sidewalk, etc., you're best to use black cedars. They can tolerate salt. Again, they don't like it, but they can tolerate some salt, and you'll have better results with them because the salt will kill most plants. So don't waste your money on the plants or the time of planting them. If you plan on using salt, don't even put them in there. So don't plant your cedars near any large trees. Keep in mind the canopy that's above the ground there, the leaves, down below, that's about how far the roots will spread out. And at the very edges, it's quite thin, but they will still suck up a lot of water right to the edge of that canopy. So anything planted underneath that canopy is going to be in competition with a much, much larger tree that's going to have a lot more success. A typical large tree will suck up 100 to 200 gallons of water a day, believe it or not. And any cedar that's in that area is going to have a hard time getting its water or the nutrition that it needs to do well. Not to mention it's probably in the shade also if it's underneath that canopy. Now, how would you describe the wind in your area? Keep this in mind and bring that information with you when you come down, because it will affect on what variety of cedars we may recommend to you, or to give you some strategies on how to prevent wind damage. Generally speaking, if it's a very congested subdivision, you're going to have protection one way or another. But even within subdivisions, with a lot of houses and trees around already, what you could get is some very concentrated wind tunnels between the homes. The homes nowadays might be as close as 6 or 8 feet apart from each other, and you're going to have all that wind being diverted around the edge of the house and down that wind tunnel. So you can have some pretty strong winds, even in, say, a protected subdivision area. A wooden fence along where your cedars are going to be is usually a good idea. It reduces the wind through the plant itself, as well as providing a little bit of shade to the ground. So during the hot summer months, it does keep the ground a little bit cooler. Now be sure to watch our other info videos on watering and fertilizing. After poor roots, improper watering is the cause of most plant failures. If you need any assistance, please call immediately, especially at the first sign of a cedar fading in color. Cedars seldom recover, but if you pick it early enough, you may be able to save the rest of your cedars by adjusting the watering, which is generally the problem you're going to have. Again, if you go into our other info videos, you'll start to understand where and why roots are the main cause of failures for cedars. And with our particular cedars, that's not an issue because we properly cultivate the root systems. So if there's a problem with one of our cedars, the root cause 99 out of 100 times is going to be improper watering. Generally not enough water, once in a while too much water. So you have to understand what the proper watering amount and the frequency is in order to avoid any trouble. And at the first sign of a problem, we want you to contact us because we can get you back on track. Waiting until several start to fade on you is going to be too late, because at that point the rest are probably already stressed. Cedars do not tell you when they need water. They tell you when they're dead. Once you start to fade out like that, the chance of recovery is extremely slim. Proper planting materials are key to success. While most garden centers will try to sell this to you during checkout, we believe it's so important that we will provide it at no cost with minimum plant purchases. So for example, from $50 to $200 of net plant purchases, you would receive the most important additive, which is the root stimulant. This is what helps your roots to get established during that very crucial first year, and it's the foundation of your plant going forward. From $200 to $400 in net value of plants, you would receive the root stimulant as well as real cedar mulch. The real cedar mulch is provided to help keep the roots cool in the summer, warm in the winter, assist in retaining moisture throughout the year. In addition, it helps to control weeds and discourages insects. $400 to $5,000, you would receive the previous as well as a commercial grade time-release fertilizer. This is pretty amazing fertilizer in that it releases based on the temperature of the air as well as the amount of precipitation that the fertilizer is exposed to. So unlike some of the cheaper fertilizers which just give you a quick jolt of fertilizer which could actually damage the plant, this time-release fertilizer is basically controlled on what the plant needs as it needs it. At $5,000 and over, you receive the same as the previous amounts. In addition, you have another year's supply of the good quality time-release fertilizer. We provide the fertilizers to you during the year that you require them. The reason for this is to keep them fresh so that they retain their full effectiveness. In all cases, if you're planting hedges, we will provide inspection pipes for free, as well as a site inspection if we're doing deliveries. And the site inspection is done during the time of the delivery. An arrangement that has been proven very popular over the last couple of years has been the wholesale pricing arrangement. This is the pricing that we offer to the garden centers that purchase off us, as well as landscapers and developers. We have extended this to our retail customers if they're buying enough quantity of a specific size and variety. For example, the minimum required would be 20 plants of the same size and species in order to start qualifying for the wholesale price arrangement. In other words, say you're buying 20 plants of, say, 20 boxwoods, 1 gallon boxwoods. At 20 plants, you would now be entitled to a 15% discount on not just that group of plants, but your entire order that you're placing at the time. This discount only applies to the plants. It doesn't apply to things such as soil, mulch, or delivery. If you're purchasing 30 or more plants, you'll be getting 20%. If you're purchasing 40 or more of the same variety and species, again, 25%. And 50 plants of the same size and species, you would be getting 30% off that group, as well as the remaining plants that you have on your order. Now, wholesale pricing does not include the 5-year warranty, the root stimulant, mulch, or fertilizer. Basically, you're getting the plant only, along with a 50% replacement warranty for a 1-year period. This is in contrast to the 5-year warranty that the retail customers purchase, as well as they're getting the free root stimulant, mulch, and fertilizer, etc. Wholesale deliveries are directly off the back of the truck and directly onto the ground. Retail deliveries, this includes placing plants anywhere on the property up to 150 feet away from the unload location of the truck. So that's another difference when you're deciding if you want to go with wholesale or with retail arrangement. Thank you. We do offer our retail customers the option of purchasing wholesale, assuming that they meet the minimum requirement of plants. Now, to get any type of wholesale arrangement, you have to buy at least 20 of the same variety and same size plant. And for most homeowners, we won't even suggest that you go that way, won't even bring it up probably, because that 15% that you're saving is not worth losing our 5-year warranty or not getting our bone meal and getting mulch and fertilizer at no cost. You have to buy those separately, so it's probably not worth your effort to even consider it. This is generally mostly attractive for people that are flipping houses. They're looking very short term in terms of the plants, and they want to get the lowest price regardless. So they will often opt for that, even 15% off. They'll take it
regardless of what it means in terms of the warranty, etc. But for most homeowners, we do not recommend you take that. Once you start getting over 30 plants or more, now it's something you may want to start considering because it becomes more attractive with the larger volumes, all the way up to 40% off when you're purchasing 100 or more. I do want to point out that once you get over the 35% or 35% to 40%, you have to put the order in before March 1st, as we pre-dig all of our plants in March for our April sales, and we need to have the larger numbers like that cemented and confirmed before March 1st. Now, wholesale pricing does not include the 5-year warranty, or the root stimulant, the mulch, or the fertilizer. In addition to that, the wholesale deliveries are only done directly off the back of the truck and directly onto the ground. Retail deliveries, we can place them anywhere you want on the property, up to 150 feet away from the unload location of the truck. For more details, you can either email us or look at the website for more information.
Happy gardening from all of us at Save on Plants. Thank you for visiting our website, and if you have any more questions, you can email us at the email address below. As well, be sure to watch our other info videos, especially the ones on planting and watering, to ensure your success. Thank you and enjoy the season.